a misunderstanding among the kind of progressive postmodern view is that looks like the kid being completely self-directed. But that's not the case. Learning takes place in this context of what I call teacherly authority. And so this is the big thing that needs to be handled when you're thinking about alternative education, which is what are the contexts and dynamics of teacherly authority that are being established? And I use that word authority very specifically because it kind of like, it's a little bit, when people get a little bit upset, especially the postmodernists that I'm talking about, authority, to which I say, well, on whose authority are you upset? But that's another issue. But basically it's a teacherly authority is a species specific trait. So like if we go back 600,000 years or 12,000 years or whatever, there's always been teacherly authority, even though there hasn't been schools. And teacherly authority is just when two humans get together and something needs to be done. And one of those humans obviously knows more about this thing that needs to be done. The other human wants to know. They both recognize that situation and they agree to collaborate in an educational way. Right? So that's like a very primordial type of human interaction, which is actually everywhere. Like you can't avoid it. Even if you want to be a non-hierarchical postmodernist and you don't want to see that there are asymmetries in knowledge and capacity between people, right? Even if you want to think that, you can't get out of that. As soon as you start to tell me that, you've put yourself in a position of asymmetric knowledge about that over me, right? Like there's no escaping these dynamics of knowledge and capacity asymmetry, right? And it's very important that schooling replaced what I would call organic teacherly authority, which is a spontaneous relationship that emerges in the context of mutual understanding about those asymmetries. It replaces organic teacherly authority, which can occur almost anywhere with anybody, with what I would call institutionalized teacherly authority, which means that you have authority over me as a teacher because the state gives you power to have authority over me as a teacher, not because you necessarily have asymmetric capacity over me. And kids start to detect this very early. And kids know about asymmetric capacity, right? They know about artists, like hip hop artists or athletes and other things where it's just like, okay, like that guy is clearly better at this than these other people. So they get that. And so the question of, is this teacher that's been mandated by the state that I have to give, authority to, or do they have that asymmetry? Like, it's not clear. So the delegitimation of institutionalized teacherly authority, right, leads many people to just question teacherly authority as a category in general. And so a lot of what needs to occur in the kind of movements of homeschooling is a way to preserve contexts where really healthy, beautiful forms of teacherly authority can emerge. And that's delicate to do. It's very delicate, but it's a huge relief when it actually occurs. Like, because that's the thing, like kids actually don't want to be completely left alone. Like, and I hear it all the time from kind of postmodernist parents, like, oh, my kid's my hero. It's like, what? Do you know what the word hero means? Like, kid's not a hero. The kid's a kid, right? And if you treat the kid as if they're an adult, as if they're a hero, you're actually doing a huge disservice to them. You're putting them in a position where they have nowhere to look now for teacherly authority. And they're actually in an unsafe situation where the people who should have authority over them are relinquishing that authority, right? Why are they doing that? Complex question. But they are relinquishing authority. They are actually saying that, no, the little kid knows more than me. The little kid is actually the hero. I'm a foolish adult, right? And this speaks to this deeper generational crisis that we're in. But this needs to be avoided. This just, we can't run a society when the older generation relinquishes its kind of responsibility to the younger generation to assume teacherly authority. And so in the context, and there's a lot of movement in homeschooling, deschooling these days. What's interesting is that 20, 30 years ago, most of the homeschooling stuff was occurring with the Christian right. Like most of the homeschooling laws and all these things were occurring for the Christian right. Like they wanted to raise their children in a very kind of traditional Christian context. And so laws were put in place to allow for that to happen. But now what we're seeing is like a huge swelling of interest among progressives and left-leaning folks towards doing the homeschooling thing. So there's a movement that's growing that's slowly drawing energy out of the mainstream institutionalized context and putting energy in these kind of like a Wild West, kind of like almost startup culture of all these different approaches to homeschooling. And so what I'm saying here about teacherly authority and about separating learning from schooling, these are things that apply across the board, that the homeschooling context need to be contexts in which organic teacherly authority can emerge and be maintained and held responsibly. And again, that kind of teacherly authority can occur between younger and older students, right? Like it can occur between parents and their children, but can also occur between someone who's an artisan or a mechanic and someone who's not, right? Like when I bring my car to the auto mechanic, like he's the teacher. Like I'm way down here. I barely understand what's happening with this thing. I like point to something that's making noise. And he's like, oh, that's their carburetor. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was the carburetor. So it's like that. And so it's not about what we've done in schools, institutionalizing immovable hierarchies of teacherly authority that are mandated by law and by the state. Mm-mm. Organic teacherly authority is fluid. It comes and goes. In one context, you're the teacher. In another context, someone else is the teacher, right? So it's got this fluid, but the ability to recognize when that's happening and to enjoy when that's happening and to seek out places where you can be a student, right? To seek out the asymmetries of knowledge and capacity because you want to find someone who can actually teach you these things. That's what needs to be instilled in the youth, instead of this attitude that, nope, there's actually no one who can teach me anything, right? To give up on the older generation because they've given up on themselves. They've relinquished teacherly authority and you agree that they should. And then you have a younger generation that is arrogantly dismissive of the potential that there could even be teacherly authority with the elders. And the elders who are kind of saying, well, I've got nothing to teach you, kid. Like we failed, my generation failed, And so that generation gap, the animosity between the generations, the only knowledge of teacherly authority being institutionalized teacherly authority. And I'm speaking very abstractly, but these are really fundamental things. Like, does the child come to love learning? Does the child come to respect teachers and seek out teachers? And then the final bit, which I'll get for those people who are wary of the concept, is that there are, of course, pathological forms of teacherly authority, right? Like there are pathological forms of teacherly authority. We need to be able to recognize them. In the work I do for the Consilience Project, I wrote a lot about propaganda. Propaganda is the most obvious case of distorted teacherly authority, right? So distorted teacherly authority looks like a situation where there's an asymmetry of knowledge. Both parties know there's an asymmetry of knowledge. So I know that you know more than me. But the party with greater knowledge and power and capacity sets up a situation of engagement where the student can never come to know as much as they know, right? That there's an asymmetry of knowledge and it's guarded against the breach, right? This is how propaganda works, right? You're never going to know as much as the government knows. And they're very carefully telling you stuff in such a way that you'll never find the pathway up to know what they know, right? And this happens also in distorted spiritual teacher dynamics, right? Because the distortion of teacherly authority in spiritual teaching is rampant. And that's, again, a situation where how do you know if it's pathological? Because the teacher actually has no intention of you being able to do what they do. Whereas healthy teacherly authority, the whole point of the relationship is to make it obsolete. The whole point of healthy teacherly authority is to make that teacherly authority obsolete, which means my goal as a teacher is to bring you up to my level and to have you surpass my level, right? And I'm not hiding stuff from you. Like I'm appropriately bringing you in as you're ready to look at the very thing that I'm looking at. We're looking at the same text together. We're looking at it together. And I want you to be smarter than me. I want you to know more than me. Like you're the future. Like you actually have to take up the mantle of the society when I'm gone. Therefore, I have to get you to a place where you know as much as me or can't surpass me. So that's a sign of healthy teacherly authority. When the asymmetry is there, it's recognized. But the whole point of the interaction is to lessen the asymmetry and to actually have the student surpass the teacher. And when you feel that with a teacher, like when you feel that the teacher is not strategically relating to me, because if you think about it, it is authority, it is power. So there's a weird egoic interest that a teacher would have in keeping you in your place, right? You will always be my student, and you'll never know as much as me. But when you feel the opposite of that, when you feel a teacher who actually really is deeply invested in you coming to know what they know or more than they know, it's a kind of love. It's a kind of selflessness that becomes tangible. And if you've had that experience with teachers, and again, schools run right now, despite the fact that they should all be like falling apart, they run on the fact that there are some teachers in there who are doing this. like love is like holding the thing together. Even it's ready to break apart, but there are just teachers dedicated enough and loving enough that they're actually doing this. They're actually feeding children with the love of sincere learning from feeling sincere teaching. So that's just worth noting that like there's obvious dynamics of pathological teacherly authority, but it's tangible when you're in a healthy student-teacher relationship. Like you can feel it, the appropriateness of it, the excitement of it, the shared interest in the progress of the student, and the uniqueness of the relationship. Like you can't commodify and routinize organic teacherly authority. You can do that with institutional teacherly authority, right? Everyone this age learns from this woman, right? Like just how it is. But organic teacherly authority, it's much more unique. The interpersonal relationship, much more subtle. And that's why the homeschooling pods give tremendous opportunity for the emergence of that kind of organic teacherly authority. So there's like an opening there where we're actually like rehearsing ancient forms of interpersonal relationship with the family, the community, where the kids themselves kind of self-organize to gravitate to those older people who they really feel that kind of connection to, right? And the older people have the discretion to be like, okay, kid, you're not quite ready to work with me yet, but these ones I can really work with. And so that sense of allowing for that flexibility so that any teacher-student relationship that emerges is truly authentic, organic, legitimate, teacherly authority. And there isn't any just kind of like strange bullshit going on, which is what happens in schools all the time. I can't tell you how many teachers I had. Well, first of all, I had some amazing teachers, like by the grace of God, who taught me that there is this thing called organic teacherly authority, where it's like, I would learn from you, like on a park bench, like anywhere. Like I'm not learning from you because the state mandates me to be here or I get arrested. Right. But then there are definitely other teachers where it was just hard to find respect. It was hard to be invested in what they thought of me. Right. It was hard to see how what they were teaching was relevant and to see that they had any interest in me really learning it. You know what I mean? So those kinds of, that just undermines the love that is actually the root of educational experience, is actually the love.